Hi, I'm Brittany. Welcome back to my channel. Today I will be wrapping up my reading for the entire year of 2019, and I'll be discussing my reading resolutions for the upcoming year. Some of the books that I read I don't have because I borrowed from the library and other resources. The first book that I completed in 2019 is A Fatal Twist of Lemon by Patrice Greenwood. I don't know if I'm saying her name right, but I tried. It's kind of like a cozy tea room mystery. The characters were interesting, and the build-up promised to be interesting, but then it kind of fell flat in the last chapter or so, with the resolution and the tie-up, tying up the loose ends, kind of just felt flat for me. For that reason, I'm only gonna give it a 2-star rating. The next book is a Pride and Prejudice variation, and you will note that a lot of the ones that I read are Pride and Prejudice variations, because I am obsessed. This one is called Murdered at Neverfield Park by Jen Rowland. I give this a 3. The characters were, for the most part, consistent, although there were some changes made because it was a mystery and it needed to be changed. The overall conclusion of the mystery was not as interesting as I was hoping. The next book is from one of my favorite authors, Agatha Christie, and it is A Cat Among the Pigeons. I give this a 5 out of 5, which I do a lot. The next one is another Pride and Prejudice variation, The Letter of the Law by J. Dawn King. Frankly, I don't remember much of this. It felt a bit, all I remember is that it felt contrived. The circumstances of the variation felt contrived. And so for that reason, I give it a 1. Love, Letters, and Lies is another Pride and Prejudice variation, and it's by Renita McMahon and Summer Hartford. I can't read it because I don't have my glasses. I think that's right. The next one is yet another Agatha Christie, and it is Parker Pines Investigates. This is my favorite type of detective story. It's a detective agency, but it's different. It's hard to explain. I highly suggest you read it if you are a fan of detective mysteries, like the old-fashioned kind. I really can't think of a literary counterpart because I think the closest would be somewhat Sherlock Holmes, but not, because I can't think of any. But I give it a 5 out of 5 stars. The next one is Edmund Bertram's Diary by Amanda Grange. I love these type of stories, and I've read her other ones, the Mr. Knightley's Diary before. I've read Darcy's Diary. I have to say that out of those ones, my favorite has to be Darcy's, because it really adds a lot to the story. Edmund's I just found to be irritating, and I realized why. Because I find the character of Edmund to be really irritating. Because he falls in love with a woman who is, not even lies about what she is, okay? She, full on in your face. And yet, he refuses to see it. He thinks she's joking, and I'm just, sitting there you're an idiot. You don't deserve to be happy. Fanny, move on. Find someone better. For this reason, I'll give it a 2-star. Because the writing wasn't horrible. The writing was good. It was just that I don't like the character. The next one is another Agatha Christie called Black Coffee. It was adapted into a book because it was Agatha Christie originally wrote it as a screenplay apparently, and it was adapted into a book by Charles Osborne. I give it a 3.5. Overall, I would say that it was pretty impressive. Not my favorite, but it was still really good. The next one is a true crime story about H.H. Holmes, America's First Serial Killer by Adam Selzer. I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm sorry. Something that I found really interesting is a lot of the facts that I had previously thought were true about it. He goes through and he actually proves that none of them were actually based on fact. It was just hearsay and press drumming up press about it. And he went through categorically and talked about the things that could be proven and the things that couldn't be proven about what we've previously believed about H.H. Holmes. And I found that really, really fascinating. I give it 5 stars for that reason. It makes you question when you're just like, oh, I automatically know about this, or, you know, well-known facts that may not actually be facts about famous cases like this. You should really do your research before you state opinions. And that is what I love about that book. The next one is another true crime story. It is called The Killer of Little Shepherds by Douglas Starr. I give this a 1-star rating because I really feel like it was 2 books smashed into one, and you would alter between the 2 with every chapter. One chapter was a detailed story about a serial killer. The other was a kind of an autobiography of one of the fathers of forensic science. And I find that fascinating. I've always been fascinated by forensic science, and so I would really get engaged with how he was developing different techniques. But then I would get snapped right out of it into the story of the serial killer with no real connection between the 2. It felt very disjointed, and for that reason I only give it a 1. If that's your kind of thing, I personally would have preferred it to be 2 different stories, because I couldn't really fully engage, because just as I was getting engaged into the one, it snapped to the next and vice versa. So I couldn't really get all that interested in either. The next is The Humming Room by Ellen Porter. It's kind of supposed to be like a different spin on The Secret Garden, which is why I picked it up. I've always loved The Secret Garden. It was one of my favorite stories as a kid. There's a few elements of it that I found very strange. I don't want to get into too much detail. It's basically the same plot as The Secret Garden. She's now an orphan, so she goes to live with her uncle. She discovers a cousin and finds a garden, a secret garden. If you like The Secret Garden, I'm sure you might enjoy it. I mean, not to say that I didn't enjoy this story, it wasn't as engaging or as magical as The Secret Garden. So for that reason, I give it a 2.5 stars. Next one is Mansfield Park by Jane Austen, which is, of course, the original to Edmund Bertram's diary. Fanny Price is probably one of my favorite heroines that Jane Austen wrote. My absolute favorite always has to be Elizabeth Bennet, but Fanny Price comes at a very close second. She is very quiet and unassuming in the book. The adaptions get it wrong, but I don't need to say that because the book is always better. I give it 5 stars, although I have read it before, so it's not too surprising. The next 7 books are all Agatha Christie's that I read. 1 to Buckle My Shoe, Death on the Nile, Evil Under the Sun, Murder at the Vicarage, 3-Act Tragedy, After the Funeral, and Dumb Witness. These are all amazing. You know what? I give them all 4 stars because I love them. I would say that Dumb Witness is probably my favorite out of all of them, and so I give Dumb Witness a 5. I highly recommend all of Agatha Christie's work. Some of it can take plot lines and character names from her other works, but for the most part, she doesn't do that. There's only a couple that I've found that she does that with. They're not coming to mind right now, but I highly recommend. The next one is another Pride and Prejudice variation. It is also a mystery, and it's called The Honorable Mr. Darcy by Jennifer Joy. I don't know if any of you remember, but this is actually one of the books that I read in my very first ever video, in my very first ever reading vlog. Honestly, looking back at it, I would give it a 3-star rating. Again, I love Elizabeth Bennet, and so that was, I love her. The mystery was engaging. I mean, Mr. Wickham, who I expected to be the villain, was the victim. He got murdered in the first chapter, I think it was. Overall, it was building, the mystery was growing, and then we just have this conclusion that's kind of not worthy of the build-up. It wasn't a very satisfying ending. Other than the fact that Elizabeth realizes that she has seen Darcy all wrong and she starts to respect him. But other than that, there isn't really much substance to the ending. So for that reason, I give it a 3-star. You know what? I give it a 2-star rating. The next one is A Beautiful Blue Death by Charles Finch. It is the first in a series, and I do want to keep reading this series. I would say that it is very much along the same lines as Sherlock Holmes. He's English, he's a genius, he has a wealthy, well-connected family, and it's set in the Victorian era. It is a very interesting plot, but unlike Sherlock Holmes, he has the ability to sympathize and relate to the people that he talks to, who have lost somebody that they love. It is a very interesting story, and it's a very interesting protagonist, I find. So for that reason, I give it 4 stars. The next one is an Agatha Christie, although she published it under a pseudonym by Mary Westmacott. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it is one of the pen names that she would occasionally publish under, and the book is Absent in Spring. It's more of a internal dialogue with, looking back on the past. I really liked it with, the thought of, maybe because she realizes how she's treated people and that it wasn't the best. But the letdown, I'd have to say, was at the end when she goes back to her life with little to no change after the reflections she had. So for that reason, I actually have to give this Agatha Christie a 2. Because the potential was there, but it just wasn't as satisfying of an ending. The next couple of books that I read, some of them are knitting books, so I won't even bother to mention those. The Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling. I gave this one 5 stars because I love Harry Potter. Another book that I read by Agatha Christie is Sleeping Murder. Sleeping Murder and Murder at the Vicarage, because it's 2 books in one. I would give Murder at the Vicarage a 4, and Sleeping Murder I'd give a 3.5. Just because the motive behind the murder I found to be odd. And I don't know, I just didn't find it to be all that realistic. But that's just me. There are several short stories that I read by Agatha Christie with Miss Marple starring. One of them is The Companion, The Thumb Mark of St. Peter, The Case of the Perfect Maid, and The Tuesday Night Club. I'd have to say my favorite out of these would have to be The Tuesday Night Club, because it's a group of people and they're just like, oh yeah, we have to include Miss Marple because, being polite, and then she schools them all, and I love it, and it's funny. So I give that one a 5. The Case of the Perfect Maid, I'd give maybe a 3. I mean, it was entertaining, but just, The Thumb Mark of St. Peter I'd give a 3 as well. And the Companion I'd give a 3. The next one is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban by J.K. Rowling. And as some of you may remember, this is my absolute favorite book out of the entire series so far. Because I still haven't quite finished the Deathly Hallows yet. But I don't foresee that the Deathly Hallows preceding this. So I give this one 5 stars. The next one is another Agatha Christie, and it is Miss Marple's Final Cases. Overall, I would give this a 4. I read several of the short stories in The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, one of them being The Adventure of the Cardboard Box, The Adventure of the Copper Beeches, The Adventure of the Barrel Hornet, among a couple others that I can't remember. I will always love Sherlock Holmes. He will always be one of my favorite fictional detectives, and so I will always give him 5 stars. The next couple are Agatha Christie's. Mrs. McGinty's Dead, which I would give a 3 star. Lord Edgware Dies, I give a 3 stars as well. Appointment with Death, 4 stars. The Dead Harlequin, which is a short story, and I would give that 5 stars. I find the whole Harlequin series to be very interesting and very different to some of her work. The Mystery of the Blue Train, I give a 3. The next one is a Pride and Prejudice variation, and it's called Inspiration by Maria Grace. It's basically where Darcy is an artist and Elizabeth becomes his muse. I found it to be weird, so I give it a 1. The next book that I read is Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies by Seth Grahame-Smith. I give it a 2 for originality, but I guess it's to be expected because it's zombies, but I just didn't care for it. But that's just me. The next one is another Agatha Christie, A Murder is Announced. I give that one a 4-star rating. The next couple that I read are Agatha Christie short stories as well. The Four Suspects, which I would give a 3. A Christmas Tragedy, I would give 4. And The Adventure of the Christmas Pudding, I'd give a 5 because it was rather surprising. And The Gypsy, I give this one actually a 2 just because, spoiler, the husband did it. I found it to be obvious from the beginning, and I wasn't all that surprised. So, the next one is Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Although I do have a slight disclaimer. I didn't read the whole thing. I got to about here, and I'm just like, I can't take it anymore. The Order of the Phoenix has always been a really hard read for me just because of Umbridge and the cruelty that she puts the students through. So for that reason, I kind of just skipped a few pages and just read what was the most important, which is the ending, what happened at the Ministry, the duel between Dumbledore and Voldemort, and of course all the secrets that Dumbledore tells Harry at the end. So those are the bits that I read, and then I just kind of skimmed over the rest. So I didn't fully read it, but I'm still counting it because I've read it before. Nemesis by Agatha Christie. I think this will always be one of my favorites of Agatha Christie, probably because it's one of the first stories that I read from Agatha Christie. So for that reason, it's more of sentimental value than anything, because it's what made me fall in love with Miss Marple as a character. I give it 5 stars for that. A Pocketful of Rye by Agatha Christie. I give this one a 3. I found the whole children's rhyme that was weaved into it to be weird, probably because it's not a common children's rhyme here in the States, and it very well may be in the United Kingdom. I don't know. But for that reason, I just couldn't really get that, I just didn't really get that element of the story. So I give this one a 3. Last but not least is The Force Awakens, the Star Wars novelization by Alan Dean Foster. I give this a 3.5. It's better than the movie because it adds more and explains more. But the characters aren't all that compelling. I think I will always love the Star Wars, or the original Star Wars trilogy, more than, I don't really care for the prequels, and the sequel trilogy is kind of But yeah, those are the books that I read this year. Some of them I read twice. I had a Goodreads goal of reading 55 this year, and I actually surpassed it by reading 58. I do have a couple more days in this month / this year, and I want to quick finish Half-Blood Prince, but I'm only a couple chapters away from finishing it, so maybe. But I haven't finished it yet. According to the year in books that Goodreads has, I have read 13,358 pages across 58 books. I'd say I did pretty good. Considering work and other stuff I have going on in my life, I read as much as I could, so I think I'm going to do the same goal as I did, which is reading 55 for the next year. Another goal I have is to finally finish this book, because I still haven't yet. It is also my goal to finish all of the books on my currently reading bookshelf on Goodreads. I have this problem where I tend to start several books at the same time and then not finish all of them. Or I'll start one, get distracted by one, and then get distracted by another, and then get distracted by another, and so on and so forth. Which I guess isn't horrible. As long as you go back and finish, right? Thank you for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Bye!